This is the VSA Morning Miner, and it's Friday, the 28th of March, and it's David Scriven, and I am with Ollie O'Donnell. How are you today?
Yeah, morning, David. I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
Very good indeed. Now, there's not a lot of information out on the London market, unfortunately, to share with investors. However, perhaps we could look at across the pond Fitzroy Minerals. The first drill hole at the Cabalas copper project in Chile, and your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is a relatively recent joiner to the TSX V via an acquisition which I think was announced in October and is just going through its final approvals at the moment. But they raised $3 million associated with that and have started their phase one drill program. This is the first hole, and they've done rather well, hitting 200 meters at 0.83% copper equivalent, which breaks down as 0.46% copper, 591 ppm molybdenum, and 0.07 grams a ton of gold, starting at 66 meters depth, so fairly shallow. They had indicated a couple of weeks ago that they'd hit a significant intercept of sulfidic materials, and now they've got the assays back which show good grades. I think what's particularly encouraging is that within that 200 meters you've got 98 meters at 1.45% copper equivalent, which is 0.78% copper, and just over 1,000 ppm molybdenum, and then 42 meters at 1.2% copper and 1764 ppm molybdenum. So anything over sort of 20 meters above 1% copper, I think, is significant in these types of deposits. And then 200 meters at 0.3 to 0.5 is the sort of thing you're looking for. So this is absolutely on the money, and it is the first hole. That said, it does tend to take quite a lot of capital to drill out these projects, and depending on how they partner up and fund the next phases of drilling, there are comparable projects which have a market cap of 8 million because they've gone about the wrong way, or 500. But this is certainly a great starting point. So we'll look forward to seeing what's next.
Indeed, it's interesting to highlight, particularly in relation to the moly and the uranium, of the higher grade, which is articulated in the news releases being higher than a number of other projects of that kind of description in Chile. But also, Merlin Marr Johnson is the CEO, and he's quite well known in London, so that might sort of resonate with investors. Moving on from there into the uranium space, I found it quite intriguing to see that Global Atomic are kind of re-engaging, if you will, with the US Development Bank now that Mr. Trump is in administration, and that relates to the project in Niger. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, obviously there was a coup in Niger recently, and while a lot of the other companies that are operating there in the uranium space have had down tools and have left the country and surrendered their projects, Global Atomic has actually managed to re-establish relations with the new government. It's announced a new offtake with a European group in December, and as you say, has managed to start discussions again with the US Development Bank to fulfill the balance of their debt or project financing requirements. They've spent about $124 million so far on the initial construction, but still have 268 million or so to fund. Given the coup, capital markets are not an option, and so it is going to have to come from a strategic backer. And their two options that they've highlighted are the US Development Bank and a potential JV partner. The US Development Bank says they have an April credit committee, so there's a key milestone coming up. But they are heavily reliant on that to keep things on the road. And it's almost, I don't know, it's slightly... Niger is in quite an unusual position given its ties to, or the new government's ties to Russia, that the US are still prepared to progress this.
Indeed, intriguing. And as with another situation that's also faced its challenges, but maybe we're seeing an up tools now following down tools because of the weather, is Langer Heinrich.
Yeah, that's owned by Paladin. It's a Namibian uranium project. That's a brownfield restart which commenced in 2024. And over the first 9 months of production, they produced about 1.8 million pounds of uranium. Although with this disruption caused by a 1 in 50 year rainfall event, they now won't achieve the 6 million pounds per annum run rate that they'd set for this year. And as a result, the group have withdrawn guidance. Obviously now they're now able to get back in the field, but behind schedule. But both of these just show some of the difficulties that are being thrown at companies trying to bring on new uranium supply. Even the projects which should be relatively straightforward, that are brownfield, seems to be running into issues. And then you've got sort of existential threats from things like coups that you just couldn't predict. So that's keeping the uranium market tighter than it otherwise might have been.
Indeed. Well, perhaps we'll wrap up here, unless you can highlight any other thoughts you'd like to share with us, and just quickly mention that our colleague Paul will be at the Mining Zurich Forum next week, so there could be some flow of news from his interaction with companies and investors at that event. But any other thoughts? Otherwise, we shall wish our investors a very good weekend. Many thanks.
This podcast has been produced and edited by VSA Capital. It is intended for information purposes and not as investment advice. The information is intended for recipients who understand the risks associated with equity investments in smaller companies. Please do your own research and do not rely on a single source when making an investment decision. VSA Capital may derive fees from this content and seeks to do business with the companies mentioned.